Hi, this is Jared from Summer Sun Garden & Brew. The home brewing process is fun and fairly simple. It will take about 4 to 5 hours to prepare your first batch. Perhaps the easiest approach to home brewing is to start with an ingredient kit, which you can find at any local homebrew store like Summer Sun Garden & Brew. This is what we will do for this demonstration. Ingredient kits or box kits guarantee that you have everything to start your first home brew and provide some useful instructions for making the recipe. An alternative would be to find a recipe online or in a brewing book and pick up the ingredients at your local homebrew store. Your local homebrew store will also be able to identify recipes that you can follow on your own. The first thing you need to do is unpack the box kit. You will find a bag of crushed specialty grains, malt extract, hops, muslin bags for steeping the grain and for the hops, a package of yeast for fermenting the beer, priming sugar, and bottle caps, as well as instructions for the brew kit. The first step is to bring the water to a boil. Many people use purified or boiled water. A 5-gallon kettle is sufficient to use. Use a thermometer to check the temperature. Check that the temperature of the water is around 165 degrees. Now that the water is the correct temperature, we can steep the grains. We need to place the specialty grains in the water to add the specific malt character to the beer. Tie a knot in the muslin bag with the specialty grains in them. Steep the grains in the water of the 5-gallon kettle. You can see the colors and the flavors that the grains impart in the liquid. Once you've steeped the grains for 45 minutes, remove them from the water. Rinse the extra flavors from the grains with a small amount of hot water. We've extracted most of what the grains have to give. This is really for color and some flavor. The malt extract provides the sugars needed for fermentation. So next we add the malt extract to the liquid. Malt extract is made from the process of steeping grains, as we just have done, but on a very large scale. Stir thoroughly when you mix it in. Once we add the extract to the water, we have made our wort, which is the sugary liquid that the yeast will ferment. The next step is to bring to a boil. This can be done on your stove, but for demo purposes, we will use an electric stove and a gas burner to take the temperatures up to the required level. You want to bring the liquid to a controlled boil, called a rolling boil, and make sure it doesn't boil over, which is a pain to clean up. Once the beer has reached a nice rolling boil, it is time to add the first addition of hops. Adding hops at this stage in the process provides bitterness to the brew, which offsets the sweet flavors of the malt extract. Place hops in your muslin bag. Tie the hops off. Add to the boiling wort. Set your timer for 60 minutes. This boiling process sterilizes the beer. Your recipe may call for adding additional hops during the process. Hops added at the end provide aroma to the beer. Remove your hops at the end of the boil. At the end of the 60-minute boil, you want to cool the liquid down as quickly as possible to a temperature that is good for the yeast. At home, you could place the 5-gallon pot in icy water. We'll use a wort chiller as means of removing the heat as quickly as possible. The chiller pushes cold water through the copper tubing, which becomes heated by the liquid. The cold water exchanges heat and rapidly cools the liquid. The wort chiller goes into the wort about 10 minutes before the end of the boil to sanitize the chiller. As the wort cools, there is potential for bacteria to get into the wort and survive, so we must make sure that everything that touches the wort is sanitary from this time on. Make sure items are properly sanitized. No-rinse sanitizers work on contact and work very well. Add wort to the fermentation vessel. Top the wort off to 5 gallons with sterile water. It is good to use a fermentation vessel that is larger than the batch you are brewing because as the beer ferments, it bubbles up and you don't want it to blow out. A 6-gallon carboy is recommended for a 5-gallon batch. Once the wort is in the carboy, it's time to add the yeast. The dry yeast is the simplest to use, just pour directly into your wort. In this case, we've used a liquid yeast, which typically produces a better fermentation process because the yeast is already hydrated. After adding the yeast, attach an airlock to the carboy with a rubber stopper. This will allow the CO2 from the fermentation process to be released, but stop airborne bacteria from getting in. This fermentation process will take about 2 weeks. Once the beer has been fermented, we can siphon the beer into a bottling bucket. The bottling bucket will have a corn sugar solution in it to provide the carbonation to your beer. 5 ounces of corn sugar is sufficient for a 5-gallon batch. Add 5 ounces of corn sugar to 1 cup of boiled water. Add the solution to the bottom of the bottling bucket and siphon your beer to the bucket. Use the siphon to transfer the beer. Now we have the corn sugar solution and the beer in the bottling bucket. We can use the bottling attachment to fill the bottles with the siphon. Place the siphon into the beer, place the end of the bottle filler into the bottles, and start the siphon. When you press the bottle filler into the bottle, it will fill without splashing. It's important not to introduce oxygen into the beer at this point because of contamination issues. Siphon carefully. Fill your bottles to about 1 inch from the top. Then pull the bottle filler out of the bottle. This will stop the flow. Put an unclipped cap on the bottle and cap the beer using the bottle capper. Once you've capped all the bottles, you will need to wait about 1 week to 2 weeks for the yeast to carb the beer. Make sure the keg is depressurized by pulling on the release valve. Release the top of the keg by pulling it back. Make sure the equipment that you use is sterilized thoroughly. Make sure the keg that you are using has been thoroughly cleaned and sterilized. Use the siphon to siphon the beer from the carboy into the keg. You may need to tilt the carboy slightly. Try not to disturb the sediment so to keep your beer as clean as possible. Once the keg is full, you can put it under pressure. You may want to check that gas is not being released at the seals. After the beer has been put under pressure, release the oxygen by using the release valve. This will help to prevent oxidization and help to keep the beer longer. To carbonate your beer, you can set your regulator to 9 to 12 psi's for about 1.5 weeks, or you can set it to about 20 psi's and it will carbonate in 3 to 4 days. Forced carbonation is what we used here. We turned the regulator to 25 psi's and rolled it for a while. You should hear gurgling, which is the beer being carbonated. You then place your beer in the fridge. Let condition, and enjoy.